Hey guys, it's Core Ross and Rainbow Six News. Today's video is all about balance in Rainbow Six Siege and how the developers go about deciding how to balance the game, how it's actually done and where it is done. And our story starts at the end of 2018 when the balancing cell was created. This was bringing together different resources in Ubisoft Barcelona in order to create hopefully a way of balancing Rainbow Six Siege that would be faster and better. This meant moving the balancing team from Montreal to Barcelona. Now, Barcelona had already done some great work. For instance, they had created the Claymore that we see in Rainbow Six Siege along with many other secondary gadgets. So they already had their toes dipped into the Siege gameplay and of course the balancing side of it with the introduction of brand new secondary gadgets. And a very big catalyst for the creation of this new team was Lion. So Lion was introduced to Rainbow Six Siege very broken and overpowered, and it did take a while to get him fixed. And this is because the balancing team before Barcelona didn't have easy access to production, because that team was actually making 2 operators per season, a new map, there was a lot going on. So going over to Barcelona opened up some production pipelines, which resulted in far faster and better balancing changes that they could introduce to the game. Now let's move on to talk about how they choose what balancing changes to make. So there's the obvious one, which is just simply data. So this is spreadsheet after spreadsheet of all the data that Rainbow Six Siege captures, which is everything the player does. Now we get a small digestible slice of that when we see the balancing changes and they show us the graphs, which show presence and win rate. However, if you go back to the Hot Breach podcast live from Barcelona, which was released in 2019, you get a little glimpse of all the different data sets they actually collect, which is, like I say, everything the player actually does. So they have spreadsheet after spreadsheet of everything on weapons, gadgets, how players play, the differences on maps, different objectives. They've got everything they can look into. And that's why you can often see operators with, say, a 60% presence on the graphs. However, they don't get nerfed year after year, because even though they have a high pick rate, it's not until something else goes over the edge where they decide, okay, we're going to come in and do a little bit of balancing. So for instance, Yana is a good example where she's been very high in the presence for a long time, but she's just not really been too much of a problem until recently, and they've decided, all right, we're getting rid of those frag grenades. Then another big factor in balancing is the surveys that happen at the end of every single Rainbow Six Siege season. You can usually find these posted on the official Ubisoft Discord, along with other social medias like the Rainbow Six Siege subreddit. They also used to be posted on the official Ubisoft forums as well, although the forums were actually killed off in April of this year, which allow you to actually do a survey for that season. And you can give all kinds of feedback in that. That has actually led directly to the recent change we've seen to Frost and her Frost mats. I see many comments in my comment section saying that no one ever asked for these changes. The reality is that there are actually a large amount of players that did fill in those surveys and said that they were having a problem with Frost mats, and that's why the developers then went, okay, we'll take a look at it and see what we can do. Now let's move on to what has been happening more recently with the balancing team and the significant change it's going to have on Rainbow Six Siege's balancing in the future, especially beginning with year 9. So up until now, we usually see a very similar year-to-year balancing, which means that we get operator changes. So for instance, this year we've had major changes to Zero, Grim, Frost, Legion. We've had shotguns get an entire rework as well, and that's not mentioning them all. And then we know that next year they're looking to make major changes to Azami, Solus and Blackbeard, along with Recruit getting an overhaul as well. But then the other changes we see are very, let's say, boring, which is the 1.5 sight gets taken off one operator, put onto another, and frag grenades get taken off one operator, put onto another, and maybe their speed changes as well to operators to try to reduce their overall power. And although the creation of the balancing cell was to make changes quicker, I think we can all agree that maybe balancing changes these days are getting a bit slower again, with at least 6 months between something showing up that's problematic to it actually being addressed. And when I say problematic, that's from the point of view of the player base. Whereas the developers are going to be having a completely different point of view and probably planning 1 year, 2 years into the future. But that now brings us to what is changing with the balance in Rainbow Six Siege going forward. So in the last 3 to 6 months, there seems to have been a big shift with the balancing team and their direction. So they said the next few mid-season patches will be relatively normal, but in parallel to this, we have long-term plans in the pipeline for our weaker and more powerful operators. These plans will help to reinforce the tactical gameplay that Siege is known for, bringing the focus back to gadgets and utilities. With this, running and gunning will come with increased risk and difficulty. And although we have no idea what this actually means, like what are they going to do to make running and gunning more difficult, how are they going to bring the emphasis back to gadgets, but we do know whatever it is they're trying to do is going to be quite a lot of work. As they say, there is a considerable amount of work to be done until we can bring all those solutions to the live servers due to the nature of some of these changes. In the meantime, we continue to bring you balancing updates by selecting topics which, on one hand, allow us to make the necessary adjustments to the meta and work towards this goal. Now, like I said, this directional change didn't seem to actually happen until relatively recently, within the last 3 to 6 months, and that was because of the outcry about the TDM meta that showed up this year. Until then, it looked as if the mid-season balancing was mostly going to be about moving a few things around from operator to operator, and now it sounds like there's going to be some major changes that could fundamentally change how Rainbow Six Siege is played. Now, of course, Siege has gone through many major overhauls throughout the years, with people hating and loving them. So I'm interested to see where year 9 is going to take us, and that I think it'll be quite a transformative year for Siege's gameplay, and also how the developers are actually going to do it, because we could easily end up just back in a utilities meta like we were a few years ago. And simply, how do you make it so that running and gunning will be increasing in difficulty and risk? That's something they said they're going to try and do, but how do you do that in Siege? It's a very difficult conundrum to solve. And because we know that they've said it's considerable work to get this new system in place, does that mean we're going to just see an absolute overhaul of gun mechanics? Are we going to see an overhaul of movement mechanics? Or is it just something a bit more subtle that's just going to take a little bit of time to implement that maybe none of us have yet thought of? Anyway guys, I'd love to know in the comments below what you think they're going to do to completely overhaul year 9 of Rainbow Six Siege. And put your wildest ideas in the comments below, because I made this prediction about Quick Match 2.0. Now, they don't go into details on what that means, so I'm going to make a couple of guesses here. And my first thought was get rid of the preparation phase and just have attackers spawn and head straight in, make it a lot quicker. But then that means defenders don't have time to set up, so that would not work unless you pre-set up the actual sites. And I ended up being bang on, even though I thought it would never happen. And look at the comment section of that video. People were not expecting that either. So there could be some absolutely crazy stuff that we see next year with balancing that could really change up Rainbow Six Siege. Or who knows, maybe it'll end up all being exactly the same, with like weapons just being made far worse or something simple like that. And of course, reworking all the guns would take a big chunk of time, so that could well be their solution to it all. And then what they're going to do with all these operators, with Solis, with Blackbeard, with Azami, and their mention of Recruit as well. Is he going to get some absolutely kick-ass rework? And we'll see if he ends up coming in overpowered. Anyway guys, thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.